I am Jessica Miller, 32 years old, founder of Luminary Tech Solutions. For 7 years, my family thought I was running a struggling startup from my apartment. My father would pat my hand at family dinners, saying I just needed his business wisdom. Tonight was different. As Dad said, "Let me invest in your little startup." My CFO Michael walked in unannounced. "Ma'am, your net worth just crossed $1.1 billion. My mom's silverware clattered to the floor. The looks on their faces were priceless. If you have ever had your achievements underestimated by family, drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe to catch more stories about standing in your power even when others try to diminish your light. Growing up in suburban Chicago, our home operated on clearly defined gender roles. My father, Richard Miller, was the breadwinner and self-proclaimed business genius who ran a moderately successful construction company. Mom stayed home, managed the household, and reinforced the idea that women should focus on finding a husband rather than building careers. My brother Thomas was groomed to take over the family business from an early age. Dad took him to job sites, taught him about contracts, and paid for his business degree. Meanwhile, my parents steered me toward teaching or nursing fields they deemed appropriate for women. When I expressed interest in technology and entrepreneurship during high school, Dad chuckled and said, "Those are nice hobbies, Jessie, but you should focus on something more suitable for a young lady." I remember bringing home a perfect score on my advanced placement computer science exam, while Thomas got a new car for making the football team. My achievement barely warranted acknowledgement. That same night, Dad launched into a lecture about how women lacked the analytical thinking needed for tech careers. Instead of arguing, I silently committed to proving him wrong. Despite their disapproval, I applied to MIT without telling them. When the acceptance letter arrived with a partial scholarship, they were shocked but quickly recovered with concerns. "Your brother is studying business at Northwestern, where he can make connections. What will you do with a computer science degree, except fix printers?" College was liberating. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who took my ambitions seriously. I excelled in my classes, particularly in artificial intelligence and data systems. During my junior year, I developed an algorithm that caught the attention of several professors. That algorithm would later become the foundation of my company. I graduated with honors, but my family seemed more concerned about my lack of a fiancé than my academic achievements. At my graduation dinner, Dad asked if I had considered getting a teaching certificate as a backup since tech was so competitive. Mom added that at least I could work at a school and have the same schedule as my future children. After graduation, I moved to Boston and took a job at a struggling tech startup. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable. I watched the company make critical mistakes that eventually led to its failure. Each misstep was a lesson I cataloged for my future venture. Throughout this time, my family treated my career as a temporary phase. During holiday calls, Dad would ask when I was coming back to Chicago to settle down. Mom would mention friends, daughters who were getting married or having babies. Thomas, now working for Dad, would boast about deals they were closing, never bothering to ask about my work. On my 25th birthday, I decided to launch my own company focused on machine learning solutions for healthcare data. I had saved enough for 6 months of expenses and worked nights and weekends to build my prototype. When I called to tell my family, Dad immediately offered to loan me money with the condition that he would oversee all business decisions. I politely declined. That Thanksgiving, I made the mistake of sharing some details about my business plan. Dad spent the entire dinner explaining why my ideas would not work. The healthcare industry was too complex. I did not have enough connections, and the technology was beyond my capabilities. Thomas suggested I come work for the family business in their marketing department instead. That night, I made a decision that would shape the next 7 years. I would build my company in silence and never discuss the details with my family. The final straw came when I secured my first small investment of $50,000. I was ecstatic and called my parents to share the news. Dad immediately asked for the investor's information, saying he needed to make sure I was not being taken advantage of. When I refused, he lectured me about my naivety in business matters. Mom suggested that perhaps the male investor was interested in more than my business plan. Their inability to celebrate this milestone without undermining me cemented my decision to keep them in the dark about my growing success. From that point on, whenever they asked about my company, I was deliberately vague. I described it as a small consulting business that was staying afloat but not thriving. This narrative satisfied them as it aligned with their limited expectations of what I could achieve. Little did they know that I was about to prove them wrong in ways they could never imagine. Luminary Tech Solutions began in my tiny Boston apartment with just me and a laptop. My vision was clear from the start. I wanted to create machine learning systems that could analyze medical data to predict patient outcomes and improve treatment protocols. The healthcare industry was drowning in data, but lacked efficient ways to use it. My first breakthrough came 3 months in, when I cold called the Chief Innovation Officer at Boston Memorial Hospital. After dozens of rejections, Dr. N. Sarah Chen took a chance on my algorithm, allowing me to test it on anonymized patient data. The results exceeded even my expectations. My system identified patterns that helped reduce readmission rates by 17% in their cardiac unit. With this success, I secured my first major client and a contract worth $300,000. I hired 2 engineers and moved operations to a small office space in Cambridge. We worked 16-hour days refining the algorithm and expanding its applications. By the end of our first year, we had 3 hospital clients, and our system was beginning to attract attention within the healthcare technology sector. During a family call that Christmas, my father asked how my little business was doing. I said it was going well, deliberately understating our progress. That same day, I turned down an acquisition offer for $7 million, believing we were just getting started. As we entered our second year, I made a strategic decision that would prove crucial. Unlike many startups that chase rapid growth and publicity, I chose to operate under the radar. We incorporated as LTS Healthcare Analytics, keeping my name off most company documents. I hired Amanda Choi, a brilliant CFO, who had worked at several successful startups, and gave her significant autonomy. We avoided industry conferences where I might be recognized and turned down profiles in tech magazines. By year 3, our client list included 12 major hospital systems across the Northeast. We expanded our team to 20 people and moved to a larger office. I began drawing a modest salary of $150,000, still living in my simple 1-bedroom apartment and driving a used Honda. My family assumed I was barely scraping by in an expensive city. During one visit, my mother suggested I consider moving back to Chicago to save money. That same week, I closed a deal worth $12 million. Our big break came when our system correctly identified a rare medication interaction that had been missed by conventional methods, potentially saving hundreds of lives. Suddenly, health systems across the country were calling us. We expanded rapidly, hiring the best talent in machine learning, healthcare analytics, and software development. I made another crucial decision at this point. Rather than seeking venture capital, which would have required public disclosure of our financials and growth, I negotiated revenue-sharing agreements with our clients. This allowed us to fund expansion through operations rather than giving up equity or control. By year 5, we had offices in Boston, San Francisco, and Chicago, though I never told my family about the Chicago location just 15 miles from their home. Our technology had evolved to include predictive models for disease outbreaks, hospital resource allocation, and personalized treatment recommendations. We secured patents for our core technologies, significantly increasing the company valuation. During this period, I received an invitation to my high school reunion. When classmates asked what I was doing, I simply said, I worked in healthcare technology. Meanwhile, Fortune magazine had listed my company as one of the most innovative in healthcare, though they had very little information about its founder. My brother Thomas called one evening asking if I knew anyone at major hospital systems who could help him pitch construction services. Ironically, I had just finished a meeting with the CEO of the very hospital he was trying to reach. I gave him generic advice without revealing my connections. The following week, my mother called to tell me about a nice doctor she had met who would be perfect for me. Unknown to her, he was the chief of surgery at one of our client hospitals. In our 6th year, we expanded internationally, opening offices in London, Singapore, and Toronto. Our system was now used in over 300 hospitals worldwide, and we had branched into pharmaceutical research applications. A financial analysis valued the company at just under $1 billion. I owned 70% of the shares, making me worth approximately $700 million on paper. Throughout this growth, I maintained my modest lifestyle. I upgraded to a comfortable but unassuming 2-bedroom condo and replaced my Honda with a new Toyota. I donated significant amounts to educational charities supporting women in STEM, always anonymously. My family remained convinced I was running a struggling small business, barely paying my bills. Dad continued offering business advice during our monthly calls. Make sure you keep your overhead low, Jessica. Small businesses fail when they take on too many expenses. Consider diversifying your services. Have you thought about creating a website for local businesses? That seems more manageable than healthcare technology. Last Thanksgiving, Thomas boasted about expanding the family construction business to include commercial properties, growing their revenue to $3 million annually. Everyone applauded his success, while my mother asked if I had considered applying for a position at his company since my business seemed so stressful. I smiled politely while checking my phone under the table, approving a $40 million contract with a major healthcare system. As we approached the 7-year mark, we received acquisition offers from several major tech companies. The largest was for $1.2 billion. After careful consideration with my executive team, I decided against selling. We were making a meaningful difference in healthcare outcomes, and I wanted to maintain our mission and independence. The morning before the fateful family dinner, Amanda presented our latest valuation. With our recent expansion into predictive genomics and personalized medicine algorithms, Luminary had officially crossed the billion-dollar threshold. I was now technically a billionaire, at least on paper, and one of the few self-made female billionaires in the tech industry. I celebrated with my team over champagne in our Boston headquarters, then flew to Chicago for what I thought would be another routine family dinner. Little did I know that this particular dinner would finally bring my two worlds crashing together in the most unexpected way. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing potential acquisition targets with my executive team. "Jessica, honey, we need you to come home for dinner this Friday. It's very important." "Mom, I have meetings scheduled. Can't we do it next weekend?" I tried, knowing how these family gatherings typically went. "No, it must be this Friday. Your father has something important to discuss, and we've invited the Andersons. You remember Robert Anderson, don't you, Hez, taking over his father's investment firm now?" I immediately understood the subtext. The Andersons were family friends, and Robert had been an unsuccessful suitor years ago. This was another matchmaking attempt disguised as a business dinner. "Jessica, Robert is very successful now," my mother continued. "And still single. He specifically asked if you would be there." "Fine, Mom." "I'll rearrange my schedule," I conceded, knowing resistance was futile. After hanging up, I explained the situation to Amanda, who raised an eyebrow. "So, you're going to sit through another dinner where they treat the billionaire CEO like she's running a lemonade stand?" she asked. It had become something of an inside joke among my executive team, who knew about my family's perception. They couldn't understand why I hadn't set the record straight years ago. "They mean well," I defended half-heartedly. "They just have certain expectations about success, especially for women." "Maybe it's time they knew," Amanda suggested. "The Forbes profile is coming out next month anyway. They'll find out eventually." She was right. I'd finally agreed to a profile after years of declining media requests. Our recent breakthrough in predictive medicine made it impossible to maintain complete anonymity any longer. "I'll think about it," I promised, though I had no intention of revealing anything at this particular dinner. Friday evening arrived faster than I would have liked. I deliberately chose an understated outfit. A simple blue dress, minimal jewelry, and my Toyota instead of the Tesla I kept in Chicago but my family had never seen. Old habits die hard. The familiar drive to my childhood home in Winnetka brought back a flood of memories. The sprawling colonial-style house represented everything my parents valued: tradition, stability, conventional success. I parked behind my brother's Mercedes SUV with its MLR vanity plate advertising the family business. Mom answered the door with her usual inspection. "You're too thin, Jessica. And is that a new wrinkle? 32 is not too old to start using proper skincare?" Inside, the scene was exactly as expected. Dad held court in his favorite armchair discussing business with Mr. Anderson. Thomas showed Robert his new golf clubs. Everyone looked up briefly as I entered, giving perfunctory greetings before returning to their conversations. "There's my little girl," Dad said without getting up. "How is Boston treating you these days?" Before I could answer, Thomas interjected. "I just closed the Highland Park Medical Plaza deal. $2.7 million, biggest contract this year." "That's wonderful," I replied sincerely. Hospital construction had excellent margins. I knew because WED just built a specialized data center for 12 times that amount, but of course I couldn't mention that. Dinner proceeded predictably. Dad and Thomas dominated the conversation with tales of business conquests. Mom asked pointed questions about Robert's personal life while shooting meaningful glances my way. Miss Anderson discussed the volatile stock market, lamenting that had lost nearly $500,000 in recent fluctuations, a sum that represented a rounding error on my company's daily transactions. So Jessica, Robert finally addressed me directly. "Your mother tells me you're in the tech business, some kind of medical software." "It's a data analytics company, focusing on healthcare applications," I explained, knowing the deliberately vague description would satisfy curiosity without inviting deeper questions. Dad chuckled. "Jessica has been trying to get her little startup off the ground for years now. Admirable persistence." "How's that going?" Robert asked with the condescending tone I recognized from countless investor meetings years earlier. "We're making progress," I said neutrally. Robert nodded with the expression of someone humoring a child's ambitions. "You know my firm specializes in tech investments. Perhaps I could take a look at your business plan sometime. Give you some pointers?" I smiled politely, imagining his reaction if he knew WED turned down investment offers from the world's top venture capital firms last quarter. The conversation shifted again, this time to Thomas' recent vacation to Cancun. I checked my phone discreetly, noticing several urgent messages from Amanda. A major hospital system in California wanted to implement our system immediately following a critical failure in their existing analytics platform. The contract would be worth over $60 million. "Put your phone away, dear, it's rude," Mom chided. "Whatever it is can wait. This is family time." I complied, though the irony wasn't lost on me. The business decision I needed to make in the next hour was worth more than the combined annual revenue of every business represented at the table. As dessert was served, Dad cleared his throat with the air of someone about to make an important announcement. I recognized the look. It was his business opportunity faced the same expression he wore when pitching to new clients or explaining why his construction method was superior to competitors. "The real reason we've gathered everyone tonight," he began, looking around the table with satisfaction, "is because I have an exciting proposal to discuss. One that involves our Jessica." All eyes turned to me. My stomach tightened with a familiar tension. Whatever was coming, I knew from experience, it would involve my father attempting to guide my life in some way. "Robert here," Dad continued, nodding toward our guest, "has been telling me about the growing market for medical technology. And it got me thinking about Jessica's little project. My little project that was currently revolutionizing predictive healthcare across 17 countries. I glanced at my phone again as it silently lit up with another message from Amanda. The California deal was heating up, and competitors were now involved. I needed to respond, but my father was now fully launched into his grand plan. Little did I know his help was about to collide spectacularly with the empire I'd built without him. Dad leaned forward, adopting what I recognized as his business negotiation posture, elbows on the table, fingers steepled together. I had seen this pose countless times growing up, usually before he explained why someone should accept his terms without question. "Jessica," he began, "your mother and I have been talking. You've been at this startup thing for what, 5, 6 years now?" 7, I corrected quietly. 7 years, he repeated with emphasis as if the number proved his point. "And from what we can tell, you're still struggling to gain traction." "That's not a criticism, sweetheart. The technology sector is brutally competitive." I took a sip of water, saying nothing. Years of practice had taught me that interrupting my father only extended his monologues. The truth is, most small businesses fail within the first 5 years. "The fact that you've kept yours afloat this long is admirable, but maybe it's time for a different approach." Thomas nodded sagely, though his construction company was barely 7 years old itself and had required a substantial loan from our parents to start. Robert Anderson looked at me with what he probably thought was compassionate understanding. My father reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "We want to help you succeed, Jessica. Robert here has looked at the healthcare technology sector, and we both agree there's potential, especially with your background." He slid the folder toward me. I opened it to find a typed proposal, complete with Miller Construction letterhead. My eyes widened as I scanned the document. "We're prepared to invest $50,000 into your company," he announced, as if bestowing an incredible gift. "In exchange for a 60% ownership stake and decision-making authority on major business matters." The room fell silent as everyone waited for my reaction. $50,000. The amount we spent on office snacks each month in exchange for control of a billion-dollar company. Dad continued, seemingly encouraged by my silence. "I know what you're thinking. What's the catch, right?" He chuckled at his own joke. "No catch. Just smart business. You get the capital you need and we bring decades of business experience to the table." Robert has connections with several medical groups through his firm. And of course Thomas can handle any facility upgrades you might need. "You've been trying to do this all on your own, and that's admirable," Jessica Mom added gently. "But sometimes we need to accept help, especially in a man's world like business." I glanced around the table. They were all nodding, perfectly convinced of the generosity and wisdom of this offer. In their minds, they were rescuing me from inevitable failure. "This is a turning point opportunity," Robert chimed in. "I've seen companies like yours before. Small, struggling tech startups often just need proper business guidance. I could introduce you to some serious investors once we get your concept properly developed." "Let me get this straight." I finally spoke, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "You're offering $50,000 for 60% of my company." "It's a very fair offer," Jessica Dad said firmly, "considering the risk. We don't even know if your technology really works or if there's a substantial market for it." My phone buzzed again. This time I checked it openly, no longer concerned about appearing rude. It was Amanda, California, signed, $62, 5M over 3 years. Also, Time Magazine wants to move up the interview to Monday. Need your approval. The irony was almost too much. As my family offered to rescue my failing business with an insulting investment, WED just closed a deal worth over 1,000 times their offer. "I appreciate the thought," I began carefully, "but am not interested in taking on investors right now." Dad frowned, clearly not expecting resistance. "Jessica, be reasonable. You've been at this for 7 years with little to show for it. You're still living in that small apartment driving an economy car. What exactly are you waiting for?" "I have everything under control," I replied. Thomas scoffed. "Come on, Jess. When I started out, I swallowed my pride and took Dad's help. There's no shame in admitting you need guidance." "Your sister is just being stubborn," Dad told him, talking about me as if I wasn't present. "She's always had to learn things the hard way." The patronizing tone was nothing new, but somehow after years of building something they couldn't begin to comprehend, it hit differently. Richard Mr. Anderson interjected, "Perhaps Jessica has concerns about losing control of her project. What if we adjusted the terms? Say 40% equity instead." They continued discussing me in the third person, renegotiating their offer without actually consulting me. Mom smiled encouragingly, clearly thinking they were being extraordinarily generous. My phone rang. It was Michael Chen, my CFO. Normally he would never call during my family time unless it was urgent. "Excuse me, I need to take this," I said, standing up. Now Dad frowned. "We're in the middle of an important business discussion." "It's work. It'll just be a minute." I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Jessica, sorry to interrupt," Michael said, sounding unusually excited. "The California deal just bumped our valuation over the threshold. It's official. We're at $1.1 billion as of the market close today." A warmth spread through me. 7 years of work of being underestimated, of keeping my success quiet. The number shouldn't have mattered, but somehow crossing that billion-dollar line felt significant. "That's fantastic news, Michael. Thank you." "There's more," he continued. "Bloomberg somehow got wind of the California contract. They're running a story Monday connecting you to Luminary for the first time. We've been getting calls from every major business publication. The cover is blown, Jessica." I closed my eyes, processing this information. My carefully maintained separation between family life and business was about to collapse. "There was a tech reporter outside our Boston office today," he added. "They know you're in Chicago. It's just a matter of time before they track you to your parents' house." "How much time do we have?" I asked. "Hours, maybe. I think we should get ahead of this. I'm 10 minutes from your parents' place. Should I come over?" I looked back toward the dining room where my father was still explaining to everyone why my business needed his expert guidance. "Yes," I decided. "It's time. Bring the quarterly report and the press package." As I returned to the table, my father was outlining his vision for my company's future. "Of course, we'll need to rebrand, something more professional sounding, maybe Miller Medical Solutions, and you'll need a proper office, not that apartment setup. Thomas can find you something suitable." "Dad," I interrupted, placing my phone on the table. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to decline." His expression darkened. "Jessica, you're not thinking clearly. This is a lifeline for your struggling business." "My business isn't struggling," I stated calmly. "Then why are you still driving a Toyota and living in that tiny Boston apartment?" Thomas challenged. "If you're so successful, where's the evidence?" The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. "That'll be my CFO," I said, standing up. "I think it's time you all met him." "You're what?" Dad looked genuinely confused. "You have a chief financial officer for your little startup." I didn't answer, just walked to the front door. Michael Chen stood there in his impeccable suit, holding a leather portfolio embossed with the Luminary Tech Solutions logo. Behind him was Amanda and 2 members of our communications team. "Thank you for coming, Michael," I said loud enough for my family to hear. "Please, all of you, come in." As I led them into the dining room, the expressions around the table ranged from confusion to annoyance. "Dad, Mom, Thomas, Mr. Anderson, Robert," I said formally, "I'd like you to meet Michael Chen, Chief Financial Officer of Luminary Tech Solutions. Also, Amanda Choi, our Chief Operating Officer." My father looked baffled. "Jessica, what is this about? We're in the middle of dinner." Michael stepped forward, professional and poised. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Miller, but I have urgent business to discuss with Miss Miller regarding our company valuation and the Bloomberg press inquiry." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever startup problems you're having can wait until Monday. We're discussing an important investment opportunity right now." Michael looked at me, waiting for permission to continue. I nodded slightly. "Sir," he said, addressing my father directly, "I'm here to inform Miss Miller that as of market close today, Luminary Tech Solutions company valuation has officially crossed $1.1 billion, making her net worth approximately $770 million in equity plus liquid assets." The words hung in the air for a long moment. Mom's silverware clattered loudly as it slipped from her hand onto her plate. "What did you just say?" Dad asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Michael maintained his professional demeanor. "Luminary Tech Solutions, Miss Miller's company, is now valued at over $1 billion following our latest contract with California Health Systems. Miss Miller is the founder and majority shareholder." The silence in the room was absolute. 5 shocked faces stared at me as the reality slowly sank in. I had finally broken my 7-year silence, and nothing would ever be the same again. For several seconds, nobody moved. Dad sat, frozen proposal folder still open before him, his offer of $50,000 for 60% of my billion-dollar company staring up at him. Thomas' mouth hung slightly open. Mom looked between Michael and me repeatedly, as if trying to connect these two incompatible realities. Robert Anderson broke the silence first. "Jessica, is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," Amanda answered before I could. She stepped forward and opened her tablet displaying our company prospectus. Luminary Tech Solutions, founded by Jessica Miller 7 years ago. Current valuation, $1.1 billion as of today. Over 300 hospital systems using our predictive analytics platform worldwide. Offices in 7 countries. "That's not possible," Thomas said. "We've never heard of Luminary." "Whatever." Michael handed me the portfolio he'd brought. I opened it on the dining table, revealing the cover of last month's Healthcare Innovation magazine with our software platform featured on the front. The Time magazine draft cover was next, showing my photo with the headline, "The Invisible Billionaire: How Jessica Miller Built a Healthcare AI Empire in Secret." "These are going to press next week," I explained. "I've declined media coverage until now, but with our recent expansion it became impossible to maintain privacy." Dad finally found his voice, though it wavered slightly. 7 years. You've been running a billion-dollar company for 7 years and never told us." "The company wasn't always worth $1 billion," I clarified. "We've grown consistently. Last year we were valued at approximately $600 million. Mom placed her hand on her chest, looking faint. "But you drive a Toyota. You live in that small apartment. You never said anything." "I chose to live modestly and reinvest in the company," I explained. "And after that first Thanksgiving, when everyone dismissed my business plan, I decided it was easier not to discuss it with family." Michael intervened smoothly, his years of handling board meetings evident. "Miss Miller has led Luminary to become one of the fastest-growing healthcare technology companies in America. Our proprietary algorithms are currently helping medical providers deliver better care to over 37 million patients. We're expecting 20% growth next quarter." Dad reached for his water glass with a shaking hand. "All this time, we've been telling you how to run a business, and you've been a billionaire," Amanda finished for him. "Yes. And now Bloomberg is about to break the story connecting Jessica to Luminary. We're here to prepare for the media attention that will follow." Robert Anderson had been studying the materials with growing interest, his initial skepticism transforming into opportunistic calculation. "Jessica," he said, his tone entirely different now, "this is extraordinary. My investment firm would be very interested in discussing partnership opportunities." I bet they would, I thought, but kept my expression neutral. Thomas pushed his chair back abruptly. "This doesn't make any sense. If you're so successful, why keep it secret? Why let us believe you were struggling all this time?" It was a fair question, the same one my executive team had asked repeatedly over the years. "At first it was because I needed to prove to myself I could do it without help or connections," I answered honestly. "After your initial reactions, it became easier to keep my professional and family lives separate." "You all had such fixed ideas about me and my capabilities?" Michael discreetly handed me another document. "Jessica, the communications team needs your approval on this press statement before the Bloomberg article breaks." Mom was now crying quietly, whether from shock, happiness, or some complicated mixture of emotions I couldn't tell. My father stared at the portfolio contents, flipping through pages of financial reports and global operations summaries. "So all those times we tried to help you," he began. "You weren't trying to help me, Dad," I corrected gently. "You were trying to control me based on your assumption that I couldn't succeed on my own." The statement was direct but not unkind. For the first time, I was speaking to my family as the person I had become, not the daughter they thought they knew. Dad looked up, his expression unreadable. "You could have told us." "Would you have believed me?" I asked. "Or would you have tried to take over like you're doing tonight?" He had no answer for that. The evidence of his intended actions sat before him in black and white, 50,000 for 60%. The communications team had set up laptops on the sideboard and were working rapidly. Amanda approached me again. "Jessica, we need decisions about the press conference. The major networks are requesting interviews." The sudden shift was jarring. For years, I'd kept my professional life entirely separate from family gatherings. Now my executive team was transforming my mother's formal dining room into a crisis management center. Thomas stood up, his face flushed. "So what, you're some hotshot CEO now? Too important for family. Is that why you let us think you were failing, so you could have this big, dramatic reveal?" The accusation stung, but I recognized the wounded pride behind it. For years, had been positioned as the successful sibling. "That wasn't my intention, Thomas," I said. "But would it have been better if I'd corrected Dad every time he called my company a little startup? If I'd mentioned that while you were celebrating your $3 million contract, I was finalizing a deal worth $50 million by SEC." Robert Anderson stood up and straightened his jacket. "Jessica, this is clearly a family matter. Perhaps we should continue our business discussion another time when things have settled." His sudden formality amused me. An hour ago, he was patronizing me about my cute little tech project. Now he was treating me like the business magnate he suddenly realized I was. "That's probably best, Robert," I agreed. "My assistant will contact you if we're interested in discussing investment opportunities." He nodded, recognizing the polite dismissal, and made his awkward goodbyes. Mr. Anderson followed, clearly unsure whether to apologize or pretend nothing unusual had happened. As the door closed behind them, Mom finally spoke directly to me, her voice small. "Why, Jessica? Why keep this from your own mother?" The question held genuine hurt. Despite our differences, I never wanted to cause her pain. "I didn't plan it this way, Mom," I said softly. "After years of having my ambitions dismissed, I just stopped sharing them." The bigger Luminary grew, the harder it became to suddenly announce, "By the way, I'm actually running a massive company." Dad was still staring at the documents, particularly a chart showing our growth trajectory over 7 years. All this time he murmured almost to himself, "My own daughter." Michael approached again. "I apologize for the interruption, Miss Miller, but the Bloomberg reporter is now outside. They must have tracked the company vehicles here." I glanced toward the window and saw the news van pulling up. The moment of private revelation was over. The public one was about to begin, whether we were ready or not. "Jessica," Dad said suddenly, his voice different. "I'm sorry for underestimating you, for the things I said." The simple apology caught me off guard. In all my imagined scenarios of this moment, I'd never expected my father to acknowledge his error so directly. Before I could respond, Amanda was at my side again. "We need to move quickly. The story breaks in 1 hour, with or without our statement." I looked around at my family, their worlds upended by the truth I'd kept hidden for so long. Then at my team efficiently managing the revelation of my professional identity to the world. 2 separate lives colliding in my mother's dining room. There was no going back now. The next 48 hours were a blur of press statements, interviews, and family conversations that ranged from emotional to uncomfortable. Bloomberg broke the story Sunday night. Hidden billionaire revealed Jessica Miller, the secret force behind healthcare AI giant Luminary. By Monday morning, reporters had surrounded my parents' house in Winnetka. My communications team set up a makeshift press area in the front yard where I gave a brief statement confirming my role as founder and CEO of Luminary Tech Solutions. The business world was fascinated by how I had built a billion-dollar company while maintaining such a low profile. Inside the house, my family was processing their new reality. Mom vacillated between pride and hurt sometimes within the same sentence. "Jessica, I always knew you were special, but how could you not tell your own mother about this? Do you know how many times I've told people you were still finding your footing with your little computer business?" Dad retreated to his study for hours, emerging occasionally to ask detailed questions about company operations, or stare at me with a mixture of confusion and newfound respect. He seemed to be reconstructing his entire understanding of his daughter, reconciling the person he thought I was with the business leader on his television screen. Thomas' reactions were the most volatile. Initially, he stormed out of the house, returning the next day with a forced composure that barely masked his resentment. "How convenient that you never mentioned your success while I was sharing all my business challenges with you," he said during breakfast. "All those times I offered to help you, you were just laughing at me." "I wasn't laughing at you, Thomas," I assured him. "I made a choice to keep my professional life private after years of having it dismissed." On Tuesday morning, my phone began ringing with calls from extended family members and old acquaintances. Uncle Steve, Dad's brother, who had never shown interest in my career, suddenly had an investment opportunity that needed funding. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years wondered if I was hiring. My high school friend Melissa, who had ghosted me after college, texted to reconnect and mentioned her husband was looking for a job in tech. The pattern became predictable. Initial shock and disbelief followed quickly by attempts to capitalize on the connection. My assistant began screening calls, creating a buffer between me and the sudden influx of opportunistic outreach. By Wednesday, the family dynamics had shifted perceptibly. Dad, who had always dominated family conversations with his business expertise, now deferred to me on economic questions. At lunch, when the topic of interest rates came up, he turned to me and said, "Jessica probably has better insights on this than I do." His tone contained a mixture of pride and lingering disbelief. Mom had transformed our family photo wall overnight, suddenly featuring every academic achievement I had ever earned, some dating back to elementary school science fairs. She called her friends openly in my presence, her voice carrying from the kitchen. "Yes, that's my Jessica they're talking about on CNBC right now. She always was gifted with computers." Thomas remained the most complicated. During a moment alone in the backyard, he finally confronted the core of his feelings. "Do you know how stupid I feel?" he asked bluntly. "All these years bragging about the family business, thinking I was the successful one. Meanwhile, my little sister is running circles around me financially and letting me play big shot." "I never saw it as a competition, Thomas," I told him truthfully. "Easy to say when you're winning," he replied, but without real malice. After a pause, he added, "It's impressive, though, what you've built. Dad thinks so too, even if he's struggling to admit it." That evening, as the media frenzy began to subside, my father asked to speak with me privately in his study. The room had always been his domain, filled with construction industry awards and family business memorabilia. Now he seemed smaller behind his desk, less the patriarch and more just a man confronting a shift in his understanding of the world. That proposal I offered, he began looking genuinely embarrassed. 50,000 for 60%. God, Jessica, if Id had any idea. "It was a fair offer based on what you thought you knew," I said diplomatically. He shook his head. "No, it wasn't. Even for a small startup, it was controlling and patronizing. I see that now. The thing is, Jessica, I never thought." His voice trailed off. "Never thought what?" "That you'd surpass me so completely," he admitted. "When you were little, I imagined maybe you'd do well, have a comfortable career. But this level of success, creating something worth billions, I never envisioned that for you." The honesty was refreshing if painful to hear. "Why not?" I asked. "You always encouraged Thomas to aim for the top." Dad looked away, confronting his own biases, perhaps for the first time. "I suppose I had different expectations for my daughter than my son. That was short-sighted of me." Coming from my father, this was equivalent to a profound apology. The next morning brought a new wave of adjustments. At breakfast, Mom casually mentioned that Shed told the Johnsons next door that her daughter might be featured in Time magazine. Dad checked his phone and announced that Luminary's stock equivalent value had increased 2% in pre-trading estimates. Even Thomas had begun a subtle shift, asking genuine questions about healthcare technology over coffee. "So, your algorithm actually predicts patient outcomes, that's why hospitals pay for it." The curiosity in his voice was real, without the competitive edge that had characterized our interactions for years. By Friday, a week after the revelation, my mother organized an impromptu family dinner. Unlike the tense meal that had triggered the exposure of my secret success, this one had a different energy. My parents had invited no outside guests, set no agenda beyond family reconnection. As we sat around the same dining table where everything had changed, Dad raised his glass in a toast. To Jessica, he said, his voice steady but emotional. "You've built something remarkable and done it entirely on your own terms. I'm sorry I didn't see your potential sooner. I'm incredibly proud to be your father." Mom's eyes welled with tears as she added, "We always wanted the best for you, even if we didn't always understand what that meant." Thomas clinked his glass against mine. "Next time I offer business advice, feel free to laugh me out of the room," he said with a self-deprecating smile. The moment wasn't perfect. Years of ingrained dynamics wouldn't dissolve overnight. But it was a beginning, a first step toward a new kind of family relationship built on who we actually were rather than who they had assumed I would be. Later that evening, as my team prepared for our return to Boston, Amanda asked the question that had been on her mind all week. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Keeping the secret all these years?" I looked toward the living room where my family was gathered, still awkwardly navigating our new reality, but making genuine efforts. "I'm not sure yet," I answered honestly. "But I think we might be building something better now, something based on truth." 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated. The media attention eventually died down as newer business stories emerged. Luminary continued its growth trajectory, expanding into preventative healthcare AI and opening new offices in Seoul and Berlin. More significantly, my relationship with my family transformed in ways both subtle and profound. After the initial shock wore off, we began the delicate process of rebuilding connections based on who we truly were, rather than the roles we'd been assigned. My father, perhaps surprisingly, made the most dramatic shift. After 4 decades of seeing himself as the business authority in the family, he embraced a new dynamic with remarkable grace. Our Sunday calls evolved from him offering unsolicited advice to genuine exchanges about leadership challenges and strategic thinking. "Jessica, do you think the healthcare model is shifting toward preventative analytics?" he asked during one such conversation, having clearly researched the topic beforehand. "I've been reading about predictive modeling in patient care." The genuine interest in my work without attempts to control or direct it felt like a gift. I found myself sharing insights I'd accumulated over years of building Luminary, and he listened with the respect of one professional to another. Mom struggled more with the transition. Her identity had been so wrapped up in traditional gender roles that my success in the business world initially left her uncertain of her place in my life. She alternated between boasting about her billionaire daughter to friends and worrying that my career would leave me unfulfilled without a family of my own. Our breakthrough came during her visit to my Boston headquarters. Seeing me in my professional environment leading a team of brilliant engineers and scientists, something shifted in her perception. "You remind me of my mother, your grandmother," she said unexpectedly as we walked through the research department. "Everyone thinks I got my homemaking skills from her, but they forget she ran her own seamstress business during the Depression. She was an entrepreneur too, in her way." This connection to our family history helped bridge the gap between her world and mine. We began a tradition of monthly spa days where business talk was allowed but not required, creating space for multidimensional relationship building. Thomas' journey was perhaps the most complex. Having defined himself as the family's business success, my revealed achievements initially threatened his sense of identity. Our relationship suffered several setbacks, including a difficult Thanksgiving where he drank too much and made passive-aggressive comments about lucky tech startups. The turning point came unexpectedly. Thomas Construction Company faced a significant challenge when a major client backed out of a contract, leaving him overextended. Rather than hide the problem, he called me directly. "I'm not asking for money," he clarified immediately. "Just advice. You've obviously figured out how to navigate business crises better than I have." That vulnerability opened a door. I shared stories of Luminary's early struggles, the times we'd nearly failed before finding our footing. He listened without defensiveness, and for the first time since childhood, we were just siblings helping each other through difficulty. By spring, our family dynamic had found a new equilibrium. Dad retired from active management of the construction company, turning operations over to Thomas while serving as a consultant. Mom began volunteer work with a women's business mentorship program, occasionally inviting me to speak with her protégés. During a family weekend at my lake house in New Hampshire, a property I had purchased years earlier but never shared with them, Dad and I sat on the dock watching the sunset. "You know what's ironic," he said, breaking a comfortable silence. "I spent years trying to protect you from business disappointment, trying to lower your expectations so you'd be satisfied with modest success." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I was so certain about what was possible for you," he admitted, "so confident in my limited vision. Meanwhile, you were quietly achieving things I never dreamed of," he chuckled softly. "It's humbling to realize your child surpassed your imagination before you even noticed." "I guess we all underestimate ourselves sometimes," I replied. He turned to face me directly. "Not you. You knew your worth even when no one else could see it. That's the part I admire most." The compliment meant more than any business achievement. My father, who had once dismissed my ambitions, now saw not just my success, but the strength it took to believe in myself when others didn't. At Luminary's annual charity gala that summer, I made a decision that surprised my executive team. I invited my family to attend as honored guests, acknowledging them publicly in my speech. My journey as an entrepreneur taught me that success is never truly individual. I told the assembled investors, clients, and team members, "Even when the path feels solitary, we're shaped by the people who challenge us as much as those who support us." I watched my parents' faces in the audience, Mom wiping away tears, Dad sitting straighter in his chair. Sometimes the greatest gift is having to prove yourself, having to work harder, because the easy path isn't available. So while my journey wasn't always smooth, I'm grateful for every obstacle that forced me to be resourceful, every doubt that pushed me to be certain of my own vision. The standing ovation that followed was for Luminary's achievements, but the pride in my parents' eyes was for something more personal. The daughter they'd raised had succeeded not despite their limitations, but by transcending them. In the year since that fateful dinner where my two worlds collided, I've learned that family relationships, like business ventures, require continuous reinvention. The painful revelation created an opportunity for something more authentic to grow in its place. Dad no longer offers to rescue my business with $50,000. Instead, he asks thoughtful questions about artificial intelligence applications in preventative medicine. Mom has stopped setting me up with successful men, recognizing that success was never what I was missing. Thomas and I have found a new dynamic as peers rather than competitors. As for me, I've discovered that being fully known, while sometimes uncomfortable, offers a freedom I never experienced in compartmentalizing my life. The billionaire CEO and the daughter can coexist in the same person, neither diminishing the other. Have you experienced a moment when someone finally saw your true potential after underestimating you for years? How did it change your relationship? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of standing in your truth despite others' expectations resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your power. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the greatest success isn't measured by the wealth you build, but by remaining true to your vision even when others can't see it yet.